see Black Adam started out as a real good time. I went into this movie in such a good mood, thanks to Dwayne Johnson and Warner Brothers partnering to put together one of the most impressive premiere events that I've ever seen. They rented out the entire AMC Empire 25. I thought they just did that for crowd control and to protect Dwayne Johnson. But no! They were playing the movie on multiple screens in the 25 theater multiplex. Not all 25, but a lot of them simultaneously. So there were huge crowds descending on the AMC Empire 25 in Times Square. We had to go through metal detectors. We got these amazing tickets. Then you had to work your way up through multiple floors to find your specific theater that was for you. I was so glad I got one of the premium screens. And then there were Black Adam posters and much more stuff and like multiple bars all set up around the theater. And they were blasting crowd favorite rock music like we were at a Hard Rock cafe. It was really fun. And then the movie started, and it was really refreshing for a change to see the DC logo come up on screen, along with that DC intro that they're still using, that I recently only really see in front of the Harley Quinn animated series, because Batman and the Joker weren't DCEU movies. Harley Quinn still utilizes this intro the best, though, because composer Jefferson Friedman takes the time to score unique music specifically to play with that intro that sets the mood for the episode that's coming up. I think they had some music playing here, but it didn't strike my fancy quite the same way that Jefferson Friedman has. But back to Black Adam, it was impossible once the movie started not to be blown away by the same huge effort that star and producer Dwayne Johnson put into the premiere. He put it into the movie too. I mean, the budget is impressive, the VFX flawless, tons of action. Plus, I've never seen Amanda Waller and another DCEU character look so good. They look incredible. Too bad Black Adam the movie has so few original ideas, and the ones that it does have come across as unnecessary or unhelpful. Let's discuss, but this is the non-spoiler review. And there is some stuff to spoil, although not great stuff. You'll be like, that is a very weird choice. Why did you do that? Again, I know that some of you will argue that, oh, well, it doesn't have to be comics accurate. A lot of people don't read the comics. Yes, but that's the engine that drives these properties. So it's frustrating when the comics are so well written, particularly this stuff when it's based on like recent comics aren't so good, but older comics or even semi-older comics are quite good, which is why they're doing all this stuff based on them. And so to make changes is frustrating, particularly when they're not good changes. All right, so very quickly, even casual comic book fans will realize that Black Adam is a patchwork quilt of cool elements from other comic book movies. It's as if Joan Collette Sarah and Dwayne Johnson sat down and watched a lot of fan favorite comic book movies and then cherry picked what they liked and implanted it in their own movie. Black Panther, Captain America, X-Men, multiple points with all three of these. And also, someone I know who also saw the movie pointed out that Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam is very similar in many moments to Dave Bautista's Drax. And I think that's true. Once this was pointed out to me, I was like, oh yeah, wow. Also, the cool oldies song choices for the movie are very similar to the unique song choices that have long been part of Zack Snyder's signature style. So they got that going for them, but it's just weird. You know, Joan Collette Sarah doesn't really have a directorial style of his own, which is fine, but it's weird, like what he decided for this was just to, Joan Collette Sarah is I think a qualified director, certainly, but it's weird that someone with so much experience would just so blatantly rip off so many other directors. Something else that Black Adam unfortunately copies from other comic book movies and big franchises overall, particularly later entries, is a bloated CGI-heavy third act that seems tacked on to the film. I would say about 2/3 through the movie, I was like, okay, time for this movie to end. You know, it's funny because I had a friend who felt the same way about the Batman. After Riddler gets captured, my friend turned to me and said, it's time for the movie to end. And I was like, yeah, too bad. and you got half an hour left to go. Now, I didn't quite feel that way about the Batman. I think it went on a little bit longer, but I really liked what came, and it kept me engaged. But when I watched this movie, I was like, oh yeah, now I totally get what my friend was saying. Because this movie just kept going. A new villain emerges, of course, to bring everyone together. Par for the course, happens all the time. And one of the things that bothered me about this movie is that here they didn't even bother to make the CGI construct that they had look anything like the actor who's supposed to have been transformed. I was like, you're not even pretending that's the same guy. As for changes, well, a big point of discussion surrounding this movie with DC fans is whether this is truly a Black Adam movie or simply a superhero variation of a Dwayne Johnson movie. And I think that when you consider all the changes that Dwayne Johnson and his team have made to Black Adam to turn him into a character that Dwayne Johnson wants to play, well, yet again, like with Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Warner Brothers lets talent do what they want to do with a fan favorite character rather than protecting that character. That's the downside of letting talent produce and having individual people come in instead of having someone overlooking the franchise as a whole. Because this is very myopic. It's just totally in the service of Dwayne Johnson rather than in the service of the DC franchise. Now, a lot of changes on that note are made to the Black Adam mythology. And in fact, the movie spends a ton of time on this. They're like, look at what we did to Black Adam. And you're like, why? It's not compelling, it's pointless, and it's not what anybody asked for. And there are even changes to Black Adam himself for his beliefs and priorities. We can't discuss this here, we'll talk about it in the spoiler review, but Black Adam makes a decision towards the end of the movie that is just totally out of character. I'm like, Black Adam would never do that. Dwayne Johnson would though, so that's why he does it. And then something else which is pretty shocking is the continued blatant disrespect for Shazam. 2 movies, by the way, 2 now, that Dwayne Johnson and his team also produce. So they're dissing their own stuff. Dwayne Johnson has made no secret that he has no interest in fighting Shazam. He feels that Superman is a battle that is worthy of him. And this movie, therefore, totally ignores Shazam, which is super awkward, talk about super, because the mythology overlaps. So they're talking about Shazam mythology, but nobody bothers to mention Shazam. Like, if soon as Black Adam shows up, and he says Shazam a couple of times in this movie, you think Billy Batson would, get wind of it and come on over. But he doesn't. Why did Warner Brothers and Dwayne Johnson even make Shazam 2? Dwayne Johnson would have been better off and he shouldn't even gotten it. I'm still convinced that Jeff Johns, as we know, convinced him to go down this path. And so the shadow of Jeff Johns still looms over DC, unfortunately, with now chatter about him potentially inexplicably being brought back. It's like, that's a big shadow that hangs over the Black Adam movie is, I thought we were moving on. What? It's like, when you find yourself slipping back into a bad relationship and you're like, wait, I think this might be a mistake. We worked really hard to get clear of this. Why are we letting ourselves be pulled back in to both the on-screen and behind-the-scenes problems? Dwayne Johnson is a good superhero and should have just created a new villain or anti-hero for Superman to fight rather than repurposing Black Adam to fit his needs. Also, as we'll also discuss in the spoiler review, what they do with Intergang here, another Superman element, is totally off and makes no sense. Intergang really in name only. They could have named this group anything and it would have been fine. They didn't need to use the Intergang name. And DC in particular is guilty of this, wasting really great comic book properties and stuff and characters to only do them in name only so that you can't do them going forward. Oh, we'll talk about Hawkman. How many times are they going to do Hawkman poorly over there? All right, there is, though, some very interesting commentary about the Middle East. They ain't lying. About how the Middle East is largely ignored by the rest of the world and left to fend for itself and almost never sided with or their grievances heard. And I think that is a fair criticism. And so at first I found this argument very refreshing and compelling in a film out of Hollywood. But Dwayne Johnson isn't Middle Eastern, so there's not really a lot of, you don't really feel like you're getting that Middle Eastern representation. And then, considering the very unfortunate and unfair reputation that the Middle East is given by Western media and entertainment, It's not a great look that in this movie you have Middle Eastern characters saying, finally, we have a superhero who will protect us. And by the way, we want them to kill. We want our superhero to kill. And you're like, wow, the Middle East is working so hard, and so is Islam, to highlight that they do care very much about love and peace, and they don't want to continually be portrayed this way by Western media and entertainment. So this movie doubles down on that. I mean, that is like really unfortunate. Complete with, once again, Hollywood's yellow filter. The Middle East is a very colorful and lush place. The Middle Eastern representation, though, despite its flaws, at times, though, is still very thrilling and often the best parts of the film. Far more interesting than the JSA stuff. You know, the movie, once again, is divided. They should have just made a Black Adam movie, or they should have made a JSA movie. Why are they making them into the same thing? But Marvel just did this kind of representation with both Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel, so again, it seems repetitive. If Black Adam had focused solely on Kondak and did bring in ISIS, etc., I think that maybe that, and went further than Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel did, then maybe I think it would have had a chance of kind of being unique. But no, Dwayne Johnson, coming from the world of wrestling, wants flashy opponents, and he couldn't get, we all know that he'd prefer to have the Justice League. You know he would. But instead he got the JSA, so enter the JSA. In the movie, Adriana's son, for instance, has posters of DC superheroes all over the wall of his room. But they're all the Justice League characters. I don't understand why nobody making the movie wasn't like, well, considering it's the JSA who shows up, can we put some JSA posters up in this kid's room? And they're like, no, Dwayne Johnson only wants people to think about the Justice League. And you're like, okay. So the JSA decides to show up and take care of this, ordered by Waller, who sends them instead of her usual Suicide Squad. Now, apparently the Suicide Squad got disbanded in the Peacemaker show, but that seems silly to me because Suicide Squad is such a good idea and so beloved by the public that no bad movie can kill the franchise. People are still interested in it. And at the very least, they should have, had some kind of, they could have had one or two lines about how the Suicide Squad isn't currently operating. So, but they're like, just go with it. Suicide Squad's not around. For some reason, the JSA already here and very active. So enter another DC team who we do not have the time to properly introduce. Very broad strokes are used here with some changes that are clearly last minute. A prime example, Carter Hall's giant mansion from the trailers, it turns out, is in New Orleans. Now, the architecture, foliage, and style of garden is totally off for New Orleans. Marvel has had a few characters in the same region recently and did a much better job with representing this community. But here, you can tell that they just slapped that on in post in the lower third, and they were like, oh yeah, this mansion's in New Orleans. Get excited. And you're like, but it's clearly not in New Orleans. Or anywhere near it. I don't even think that mansion's in the South. All right, so Aldous Hodge, though, is a fantastic, personable actor, and it's unfortunate that he's getting his big comic book movie shot with an underdeveloped, generic version of Hawkman. Sure, the sets look great. They look really great, actually. And all 4 members of the JSA are very well realized in terms of their powers. But again, there simply isn't enough time here because we have to do now a very complex origin story for Black Adam to introduce the JSA properly. If they make any impression at all, which I think they kind of do, it's thanks to the actors, the costume department, and the VFX team. In their big fights with Black Adam, it did bother me, the inconsistency of this, that for all the talk about how Black Adam is willing to kill and how the JSA has a huge problem with that, Black Adam kills so many Intergang members. Like this movie, I forgot to look up the rating. I would assume that it's PG-13, but it's close. There's a lot of kills, and very graphic on-screen kills. But they're kind of like video game-esque. So I think for the most part, most parents, I think, should probably be okay with it. But I'm just giving you a heads up. But anyway, Black Adam's like, I'll kill whoever I want to, mostly Intergang members. And the JSA is like, that's wrong. But what bothered me is that when Black Adam fought the JSA, I never got the impression he was trying to kill them. It's like, it would have been more interesting that he's like, okay, here I am, doling out more justice. And then he couldn't kill them. And maybe it would make him a little nervous and be like, uh-oh. But they didn't do that. He didn't even seem to try to kill them. So for all the moral discussion that they made us sit through, and there was a lot of that throughout the film, it's weird that Black Adam's actions weren't consistent. The best VFX here is by far Dwayne Johnson. He not only looks like a superhero physically, but he's playing one that doesn't apologize for it. So to see him levitating through Kahndaq and in all these Kahndaq and all these cool action sequences, it's really cool. You really get an idea of what it would be really like if superheroes truly existed. And I thought those elements of the movie were awesome. My other favorite cast members were those in Kahndaq. Sarah Shahi is fantastic, like a Middle Eastern version of Lara Croft. I liked her a lot. And Mohammed Amer is very, very funny as her brother. He had a lot of great moments. And Bodhi Sambhugi is also very likable as her son. I liked him a lot. I didn't even mind that they were like, oh, another superhero movie with a kid in it. And you were like, oh, okay. I had a friend who was familiar with the film who said that they felt they were going for like a T2 kind of bond with John Connor. And, you know, when someone brings that up, I can see that too. I'm like, oh, yeah, I can kind of see that. But he, you know, Black Adam and Bodhi didn't spend enough time together for that to be the case. You know, that would have been cool. And there's some stuff that's supposed to, I think, clearly happen with Bodhi that they don't even touch on, which was also kind of weird. Everything was underdeveloped. With the JSA, as I said, Aldous Hodge is a great actor and a great on-screen persona, but he's not really playing Hawkman, more generic alpha male superhero leader. And he had some funny moments in that role, although they kind of cyclopsed him, where he often was made the butt of a joke or didn't get no respect. But I think Aldous Hodge did as good a job as he possibly could with what he was given. Pierce Brosnan, Dr. Fate, once again, looks really cool. But again, because of the lack of screen time, he unfortunately does come across as DC's Doctor Strange, complete with using some of the exact same moves from Infinity War. I'm like, you can't do that. Doctor Strange very memorably did that in Infinity War. You got to come up with something else. Quintessa Swindell looks stunning, absolutely stunning. I mean, she looks gorgeous because, you know, also very Zack Snydery. There's a lot of slow motion in this movie. But so she looks really beautiful. And Cyclone's powers are very visually interesting. But it's hard to understand how helpful they really could be. Because, like, how much control does she have over the wind? It's like Cyclone is basically Storm, but with just one weather element at her command, the wind. You know, it's okay. She's basically just dances around the battle sequences. But she looks really great doing it. And Noah Centineo is the comedic relief. He's like Ezra Miller's Flash meets Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, but not as funny and not original because he's the third one to the party. As for Dwayne Johnson, he's Dwayne Johnson. You know exactly what you're going to get at this point, and that's what you get here. Viola Davis, total scene stealer. She is so good, so good. Her work here, along with other DCEU elements, really make you wish you were watching another DC movie with this budget and VFX. You're like, ooh, now we're talking. And there are some chances for Easter eggs here that they didn't take advantage of, which was a little frustrating. I was like, oh, get a little closer to those pods, please. So bottom line, if I had to bottom line it, the problem with Black Adam is that as much passion and money that Dwayne Johnson has poured into this, and again, you can really see that. He gave it his all. I wish he'd hired a better writer and read the comics. But, you know, from a movie star business perspective, I think that Dwayne Johnson, from his perspective, I think Dwayne Johnson put 110%. I think he put 200% in this. But I would feel, but again, that's what it is. That's another problem with talent taking over these characters. You can tell this was made by somebody who doesn't read the comics, who's not a passionate comic book fan. You can just tell. And it's super generic. It's super generic. And I think that with so much superhero content these days, that's just not enough to break through. Except I think to diehard fans who are thirsty for any DC content. And some of you will probably be, you know, fiercely defending this movie simply because you're Team DC. And I get that. You are in the middle of a drought. It sucks for you. Well, the MCU, on the other hand, has the opposite problem in that they're drowning in too much content. Oh, isn't that interesting? And on that note, Black Adam is yet another example of why it's not smart for DC to try and copy Marvel. Marvel is oversaturating the market itself with happy, jokey superhero content these days. DC does not need to add more of that. They and Warner Brothers need to offer relief from that. They need to offer something different, which is why Dune, The Batman, House of the Dragon have done so well. So that's my non-spoiler review of Black Adam. I know a lot of you are like, no, I just can't believe it, Grace. No, this is going to be amazing. I love it so much. Well, I think once you see it, I rarely do this, but I would say I rarely rate a movie. But just because, I know this is going to be so contentious, I would say Black Adam is like a 6 out of 10. That's where I would put it. And a number of the people I spoke to who've seen this movie agreed with me. So I'll be curious to see how you feel. But anyway, more coverage coming. We still have lots to talk about, and we're still going to make a party out of it. More coverage coming later this week when it hits theaters. For now, share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today so you don't miss that party. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.